Dear listeners, so that the channel continues to exist and can improve the quality of the content, please subscribe. 97% watch us without a subscription. Enjoy watching. The bright light burst into my eyes. Finally, a man's voice said nearby. I turned my head with difficulty. Welcome back, Yuri. My boss, making no secret of his joy, stroked my hand. Did I? The words came to me with difficulty. Yes. You are in our clinic. You were taken to the emergency room last night with a head injury. You had the paperwork on you, and they called us. We picked you up and operated on you right away. The operation was successful and you are back with us. We told your children and your wife. Your son is on his way. The investigator said he'd be here in the afternoon. My wife, do I have a wife? Recent events have made my heart clench again. My wife. The door to the room creaked open. Daddy, hello. How are you? My son, Paul, kissed me on the cheek. You made us nervous. He carefully put a package on the bedside table. Here are the fruit, juice. We're not allowed anything else yet. Paul adjusted my blanket. Mom hasn't being able to come yet, some urgent matters. She doesn't need to come. All right. Just don't worry. Looks like Pasha knew all about our breakup. I wonder what Nastier told him. What do ex-wives say in such a situation? You didn't love me. You didn't caress me. You killed the woman in me. All right. That's enough snot. The past doesn't count. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. Nastier came to see me twice, but I refused to see her. The past does not count. For the first time, I rented a small apartment near the clinic where I worked and began to get used to single life. The breakup with my wife had a twofold effect on me. On the one hand, of course, the pain of betrayal, and on the other hand, some are still not clear prospects. Only one thing I knew for sure: no new relationships with women. Inoculation against new relationships was tough. Then there was a divorce, and I was left not only without a wife, but without his corner. The children took a neutral stance, but it was obvious that they were more on their mother's side. Work. I began to operate again. In my work, I tried to numb the pain of my soul, and I succeeded. I did not drink myself to death as it sometimes happens with abandoned husbands. About 2 months later, an old friend called me and asked to see me. Yura, do you remember a few years ago I borrowed a large sum from you? He started the conversation. I remembered that. 3 years ago, Sergei borrowed a rather large sum of money from me. He was having serious problems with his business and had no one to turn to for help. I had just sold my mother's apartment and had the money. When I gave it to my friend, I did not specify a deadline for repayment, understanding that Sergei would not be able to return the money immediately. Sergei fixed his affairs, but he was in no hurry to pay back his debt. I realized that if I asked about the debt, I would lose my friend. Even my father used to say, when you lend money to a friend, imagine that you're giving it to him as a gift. And if you value that person, don't remind him about the debt. When the time comes, he will pay it back if he can. Thank you for helping me out back then. Now I'm back on track, and my business is more than successful. Sergei continued. I invested your money in the business and so far it's paying off handsomely. He handed me a bank card. This is my debt with interest. It's 5 times what you lent me. Yes. It was very convenient. I bought a small house not far from the city and a car. I had no time to take care of the household, so I hired a helper. She was almost 15 years younger than me. She was quite a young woman who had already been married. She had lived with her ex-husband for almost 20 years. They didn't have any children because she was infertile. Her husband finally left her and moved in with someone else. A neighbor told me all this. Natasha didn't talk about it much herself. I had no plans for her. An assistant, nothing more. So almost half a year went by. One day, I was chopping wood and felt sick. I had a terrible headache and lost consciousness. I came to myself in the hospital. Natasha was sitting next to my bed. It was she who called an ambulance. When doctors arrived, she was sitting with my head on her lap. I was fine. Craniocerebral injuries just don't go away that easily. But after that incident, I began to look at Natasha different eyes, and only now I realized what a beautiful woman she is. Somehow, our relationship naturally evolved into intimacy, and at one point, I asked her to marry me. We got married in the fall. I knew we couldn't have children, so I felt free to make love to her. About 3 months after our wedding, Natasha felt bad. Vomiting headaches. I immediately took her to my clinic. Imagine my surprise and hers when we found out that she had been pregnant for almost 2 months. I remember Natasha told me at the time, "No matter what you say, I'm keeping the baby." I just held her tightly to me and kissed her dear eyes. Just then, I realized the truth. If fate closes one door in front of us, it immediately opens another. In general, life was getting better. And then one day, just before the new year, I received a phone call from Nastia. "We need to meet." In a sort of pathetic, begging voice she uttered, "I made a reservation at a restaurant. Please come by 7 p.m. I beg you." Nastia was sitting in front of me, looking humbled and remorseful. Forgive me, there wasn't a single day that I didn't think about you." Her eyes began to fill with tears. "I made a terrible mistake. I betrayed you, our family, our children." She continued to speak. And I stared silently at my once, madly, loved woman. The woman I would not hesitate to give my life for. The woman who, without hesitation, had twice cynically betrayed me. The woman who lied to me for nearly 20 years. The woman who cut me out of her life and left me for another man. And now she had suddenly come to her senses and was trying to get back to me. Nastia kept saying that her time without me made her realize how much she loved me, that she only now understood that I was the only real man in her life. For some reason, she reminded me of the siren from Greek mythology. Her words lingered, lulled me into a fantasy that only I owned her heart. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." She repeated the word like a spell. And I looked at her brightly painted lipstick mouth, which delighted my ears with such sweet words, and I imagined her kissing and caressing her lover with it. Did she really think I would believe her words? That she was confused, that she didn't know what she wanted? That this woman who cheated on me had a child with her lover, left me and spent her free time with another man and never thought of me, came back because it turns out she only loved me. In her own time, she found an excuse for her meanness and left me without hesitation. She had fully enjoyed her sensual pleasures with her lover more than once in his bed. And she had coldly planned the moment to give me one last death blow. And now she was here to offer me the only precious thing she had left, but it was already being used by her lover. She realized that he only wanted her for fun and as long as she had money. That she could have no future with him. That there was number one to provide for her now. After realizing all this, she came crawling to me hoping to try to get back what she had lost. My God, do I seem so stupid to her, ready to believe all her lies? I listened in silence to her remorse-filled monologue. I had nothing to say to her. I didn't revel in her humiliation or gloat. I even felt pity for her in some way. As a human being. After all, we had been together for 40 years. But our meeting had to come to an end. And at that moment, my phone rang. Natasha called and asked where to come and get me. I gave her the address and said goodbye. "Is this your woman?" Nastia asked me quietly and looked at me with eyes full of tears. "Yes. And how long have you been together?" "For about a year and a half now. It happens." I got up. "Goodbye, Nastia. Try to be happy." When I left, The restaurant. I turned around. Nastya was standing with her hands clasped to her chest looking at me through the festively decorated window. All around me people were bustling and hurrying somewhere. Life was going on. I got in my car and turned the ignition key. The engine rumbled smoothly and quietly. I turned left and in a few seconds, joined the stream